in the chat, I saw a comment here from Tesfa. There is a tradition. Tesfa, do you want to say it out loud? I prefer if you did, please.
Hi, no problem. I was speaking on what you've been speaking of. Well, you spoke about it after, but speaking about the anthropological traditions that tend to be very extractive and harmful in communities, and anthropology especially, and this kind of heritage preservation has a history of operating in very extractive ways, and you described it very well, how at times researchers would come and extract information from communities and use it to their own ends. And so one of the correctives to that, one of the things that is very important these days in academic circles is to think about research as a collaboration, right? And a lot of researchers tend to, who engage in this kind of work, who are interested in community work, engage in a kind of participatory action research process in communities. So as you were saying earlier, there is a place for thinking about what research and what academics can bring to this conversation on heritage preservation when thinking about ethics and thinking about how we collaborate with communities going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent intervention. So I know that we'll be able to count on your contribution especially working in terms of the ethics and so on. Mm-hmm. I know we'll be able to count on you to have inputs there, no?
Absolutely. And as I shared also in the chat yesterday, one of my areas of interest has to do with diaspora as well. So that's part of what I engage with in my research. And I think that the conversations over the days have indicated to us how important an aspect diaspora is. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about heritage is African diaspora culture, right? When we're talking about heritage in the Caribbean especially. So there's an element of the historical and of the diasporic that is an important thread in thinking about what we mean when we talk about heritage. So absolutely count on me.
Excellent. So Darrell?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The name is Tesfa Peterson. I'm just kidding. I can't introduce it. But the Tesfa reminded me of something just now. I wonder as a exercise for safeguarding. You know, when I think it was Ezra early on and others talking about being away for many years, right? From Grenada, and when you return, you remember things as they were. I'm wondering if that sort of knowledge can't be deployed even in community spaces. So first think about how things have changed, how they have remained the same, and sort of create an awareness, and then if there's anything organic that comes from it in terms of safeguarding, it might be something to look at. Now I'm just thinking, I've never really thought of any initiative that would be done deliberately as a safeguarding mechanism where you link the diaspora and and those at home, no?
Yeah.
But that's maybe longer, well, maybe not longer term because that's why it's here. Right?
Yeah, can I just say that like the process of cultural change is inevitably part of what we're talking about when we're having a conversation about heritage, right? That we think about how the culture changes over time. That has to be built in. And like you said, one of the ways that we can do that is in thinking about how oral histories, right? We can do comparative oral histories. Speak to people who are away from Grenada for 40 years and what they remember Grenada to be, and thinking about Grenada now and thinking about the synergies that exist where things may be the same and where things have changed, right? And I think thinking through change is also important, in terms of what we think about as heritage as well.
Excellent. So the opportunities are there. So I'd like to participate. Shane, you want to share?
Well, I just muted him.
Yeah. No, I was hoping that Shane had something to say there.
Yeah.
So I can picture already this conference 2 years from now on cultural heritage, no, in Grenada. All right, so let's proceed then to the next topic, and this is on the issue of nominations. So we're walking through the convention now. Grenada, we're picturing the situation here. Grenada would have created its inventory, even an inventory in progress. You've looked at the cultural landscape and you want to nominate an element to the international level. So the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the urgent safeguarding list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity, or the register of the practices. No? So in this presentation, we'll be looking at nominations to the list of the convention, proposals to the register of good safeguarding practices, evaluating and examining nominations, periodic reporting on inscribed elements, and effects of inscribing elements on the list of the convention. I've been privileged to have been working in this area for the last year because I sit on the evaluation body. So I get to see what happens behind the scenes with the nomination processes and so on. No? So in terms of the list of the convention, as you know, there's the urgent safeguarding list set out under Article 17 and the representative list set out under Article 16. And the urgent safeguarding list deals with ICH that's endangered. It deals and promotes safeguarding and provides assistance. The UNESCO does when you go through the nomination process. It promotes safeguarding and provides assistance, including financial assistance. So what some states have, at least one state in the past year, what happened is that when they submitted the application to the urgent safeguarding list, they also applied for financial assistance at the same time to assist with the implementing what was called safeguarding plans to help safeguard the element. No? So in other words, they were seeking help at the international level to assist with their safeguarding of the element at the local level. No? It recognizes the value of endangered ICH for communities. So if the communities want to do it badly enough, it's something that can be pursued. I'll give you an interesting one. Right now, is there a question from the Grenada National Trust?
Yep. It's me.
Adriana Rojas, you look familiar.
Let me switch up. Let me sit here. So I'm wondering, you put an example that there are countries that have applied for the two type of funds. We know now that this project is running from the representative list. But
no, your project, the project that you're undertaking now, doesn't apply to any of these lists. You as a state party that has ratified the convention, essentially you use your rights to access the fund to make your application, right, to support a project for implementation. But you are not yet at the point where you have nominated anything for any of these lists.
Oh, okay. That's what I wanted to understand.
Okay.
So once we do this project, we are able to access to those two funds, correct?
In particular, especially because you would have established an inventory, which you will see shortly is a requirement, no? Among the other requirements, but certainly the inventory is an important aspect of it.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
All right, sure. All right. So the representative list, by contrast, looks at viable ICH. So when you nominate an element to the representative list, you're saying that the element is viable. It's a part of your cultural living heritage landscape, and you want it to be recognized at the international level. It helps to raise visibility and awareness about the element, but also about ICH in general. No? Some states use it to shed light on their country, no? Right? For example, Jamaica and reggae, right? That helps to shed light on the country's cultural heritage, right? Nominating and having an element inscribed on the representative list also encourages dialogue that respects cultural diversity. So you'll see that in this slide, I've included a link, a live link. So this would be for the technical persons and for anybody wanting to look at it. When you're making nominations or variations of these nominations to the list, you have some of the forms, no? That you have different forms that are used for making the nomination, right? And so for the urgent safeguarding list, according to Operational Directive 1, Gloria, are you there? Gloria?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I wanted everyone to hear what is outlined in Operational Directive 1. You notice it's 1. Operational Directive 1. If the state were to pursue a nomination at the international level on urgent safeguarding this, what would that look like? Could you go to Operational Directive 1 and read that for us, please?
I have to get a number.
It's on page 30, I think.
Okay. Operational. So that's after 104, you're going back to number 1.
Right.
Okay.
No. Go to page 30.
Okay. 30.
So you should see Operational Directive 1, urgent safeguarding list. Yeah, or page 30 in the PDF, page 23 in the actual document.
Page 23.
Is it page 23?
I don't know. I'm still. I see the directives. I'm seeing 30. I'm on page 30 based on the document, the PDF.
Okay. What does that say? Yeah.
Well, it does. It starts on number 10, so that means I have to go back up to get.
Okay.
Number 1.
Let me 1 second. Let me pull it. Let me pull it up. Let me show you how it's used in a second. Can you see my screen? Can you see the operational directives?
Right. So then it's 1 point. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing that.
Okay. So we the reason we're doing this is just so that members of the gathering here can see what the document looks like, no? So page 23 of the document, which would be page 30 up here of the PDF, begins the section of the text which you call the operational directives.
Right. Chapter 1.
And so you have chapter 1.
1.1, 1.2, yeah. Right.
So you'll see 1.1, and sorry for putting you in that situation.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to find it, yeah.
All right, so 1.1 outlines the criteria for inscription on the list of intangible in need of urgent safeguarding. So that's the US.
Right.
1.2 deals with the
criteria.
Representative list, right? The criteria for the representative list.
Yes.
So let's go down to page 1 of the operational directives here. And here we are. So you will notice that there are 6 criteria set out here. right? If you are going to make a nomination at the international level to the USL, Daryl and Adriana, and those of you who would be writing such a thing in the future. Could you start reading for us there? What are the criteria, namely U1 down to U6?
I have
Gloria,
to get the
please.
number. I have to get the number, or else I cannot find. I don't know. Give me the number. Is it 26, 27?
It's
If
27. It's
Okay.
page 27. Right.
Oh, page. This is 32. Page 32.
It would be page 34 there. Yeah. Chapter 1. It says chapter 1 at the top. So the purpose, the reason for this is that so that we get a feel for how to use the text of the convention and the
Ratification.
and the operational directives, no?
Article 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to. I still have trouble finding.
All right. What are you looking at on your? Can you see?
The
my screen?
convention. No, I have to. How do you minimize? So I have to go back and.
All right. If you can see my screen, you can use my screen instead. Okay.
I'm seeing your screen. List of convention nominations. That's what I'm seeing on your screen.
Oh, you're not. You guys aren't seeing the shucks.
No.
I'm sorry. I thought that you were. I was sharing a screen here. I thought that you were seeing it. Let me go through that. Technical difficulty, no problem.
Right.
All right, let me start over again. So the text of the convention has your articles of the convention, and which you referenced this morning. Let me go right all the way back up. So here's the basic text. And for example, this morning, you started dealing with the articles. Right? So that's the convention itself. That's section 1 here. You can see the mouse here. That's section 1. And that runs from page 1 to page 20. So that's where when you hear we refer to articles, we're referring to that section from pages 1 to page 20, no? The operational directives start on page, in this document on page 20. And right now we're looking at chapter 1 of that, right? So we'll go down to page 27 there. All the way down to 77. In section 2 starts there, but we're going to page 27. All right, there it is. Chapter 1. Right. So we're looking now at the criteria. Let me zoom in a bit. Right. Yeah. So could you read that for everyone, please?
Okay. You want me to do 1, then U1, U2?
Just do U1.
U1. Okay.
So these are the criteria expected to be able to satisfy, right?
The element constitutes intangible cultural heritage as defined in Article 2 of the Convention.
Okay, stop 1 second. So when you're doing your inventorying, remember the homework last night with describing the element and so on? That's the critique. That's how that relates to this right here. You will need to be able to describe the element so that its description is aligned with Article 2 of the Convention. And remember this morning you identified when you read 2.2, Article 2.2 with the domains.
Yeah.
And you were explaining to Daryl for example, the performing arts and so on. So this is why when you do the inventorying, even though you have your local categories, your national categories in your national inventory, you'll also want to attach one of the domains to it, no? So that when you fill out the form, it's aligned with Article 2.2, and in the way ICH is described in terms of those questions outlined in that form that you looked at last night, right? When you talked about social functions, who were involved, and that sort of thing. At the end of the day yesterday, it was Marlene and the other teacher, I don't remember her name, I apologize for that, but they gave us a good example of how you would create a description that would fit into U1, no? U2, then, Gloria?
The element is in urgent need of safeguarding because its viability is at risk despite the efforts of the community, group, or, if applicable, individuals and states parties concerned. Or B, the element is in extremely urgent need of safeguarding because it is facing grave threats, as a result of which it cannot be expected to survive without immediate safeguarding.
Okay, so when nominating to the USL criteria 2, you will be expected to explain how it is that in spite of the community's best efforts, the element remains at risk. And that you're saying that we want to have this nominated to the urgent safeguarding list because we believe that by doing that, it will help us as a first measure to try and save this or revitalize this element that is endangered. No? All right. U3.
A safeguarding plan is elaborated that may enable the community, group, or, if applicable, individuals concerned to continue the practice and transmission of the element.
Okay. So one of the things you'd be required to do is to submit a safeguarding plan where a plan that includes the input of the communities themselves, no? And however, when you submit the safeguarding plan, it also requires that the state indicate how it will support that plan, right? So it's not just asking for community input. It's going, what you're proposing here is that there is a holistic, collaborative initiative by the communities, supported by the state, toward the safeguarding of this element. So you're going to say to the international community that this is something that we have come up with, and we believe that this will help us to safeguard this particular element. U4?
The element has been nominated following the widest possible participation of the community, group, or, if applicable, individuals concerned, and with their free, prior, and informed consent.
We've emphasized this, I think, enough over the week.
Yeah, we did. Mm-hmm.
All right. Widest possible participation, free, prior, and informed consent. Okay. U5?
The element is included in an inventory of the intangible cultural heritage present in the territory or territories of the submitting state or states, party or parties, as defined in Articles 11 and 12 of the convention.
Excellent. All right. So that is what you're undertaking now, the inventory, right? So you see from this, that even if you wanted to nominate something to the urgent safeguarding list, you're seeing that it's reachable, right? You're seeing that it's something doable because you're already putting in place the parts that you would need. U6 now is a special criterion that applies to a particular situation. And let's see what that is, Gloria.
All right. In cases of extreme urgency, the state parties concerned has, oh my, what is that called? Has or have been duly consulted regarding inscription of the element in conformity with Article 17.3 of the convention.
Right. So,
extreme.
There is some elements, for whatever reason, the governmental committee and the General Assembly realize that some elements, because of natural disasters, because of warfare, and that sort of thing, might be displacement of people, emergency situations, no? Especially, I think if I remember, part of the discussion also revolved around, you remember when we had a few years where hurricanes were passing through the Caribbean on a regular basis? Remember that? well, we have hurricanes every year passing through the Caribbean, but islands were, so that was a part of the discussion. Then you had things like tsunamis and earthquakes and so on globally, and those were also putting particular ICH at risk, and so those would constitute cases of extreme urgency, where an element was affected, negatively affected as a result of those natural disasters or as a result of warfare. But that's hopefully we never have to use that, no? Right? But it's there if needed. So turning now to the representative list, you'll see that in terms of how it's categorized, it's U1, U2, U3, so it's urgent, 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 urgent. When you go to the representative list, it changes slightly and it goes to R1, R2, R3, R5, and so on, no? All right, and so the difference here would be R1, you still have to define the element according to the convention, Article 2. R2, however, R2 now deals with the issue of how will inscription contribute to the visibility and awareness of the ICH and encourage dialogue. One of the issues that has been happening globally with R2 has been that states have not been able to answer R2 very well, right? Because it's sort of like a theoretical abstract question. So some recommendations have been made to amend R2. And so by the time, for example, you in Grenada would be ready to nominate an element to the representative list, R2 will look slightly, the criterion for R2 will look slightly different. So keep an eye out on that, no? For when the state, you'll see that R2 will be slightly different. R3 looks at safeguarding measures. Remember in the urgent safeguarding list, you were asked to outline what is called a safeguarding plan, if you want to have it inscribed at the international level. But for the representative list, you don't have to have a plan per se, but what you have to have outlined are safeguarding measures, right, that have been undertaken by the state and the communities, and those measures that are being undertaken by the state and the community. Because remember, the representative list deals with elements that are viable anyway, no? Those are elements that are alive and well within Grenada. Again, number 4, which is similar to the urgent safeguarding list, ask again for the widest possible participation and with free, prior, and informed consent, no? So that is a recurrent part of the nomination process. And then 5, again, to repeat the fact, R5 asks you that the element is inscribed in a local inventory or national inventory as defined by Articles 11 and 12, but with the caveat, because to get into more details with it, with the caveat that communities were involved in the inventorying process, communities are involved in the updating process, no? All right, so I will I will close this and I will try and switch over to another screen. Gloria, thank you for reading those for us. Okay.
Welcome.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. So what we did just now was that what you see on this slide is what we just described on when we were looking at the text and the operational directives themselves, no? But let's look at the last 2 bullets on each side of this slide. You'll notice there that the reporting cycle is every 4 years. Or if you get an element inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list, you can apply for preparatory assistance with preparing the nomination file. On the representative list, the reporting cycle is every 6 years, and there is no preparatory assistance provided for that, no? Because there's no urgency with that. So when you as a state seek to nominate an element, you are going to determine which list you want to nominate to. But to do that, you must assess the viability. Now, the assessment of the viability comes at what stage? Does anybody recall? What would allow you to do an assessment of the viability? What about your actions prior to nominating it would allow you to assess the viability? Anybody can think of that?
Asking for permission.
From whom, Dario?
From the community.
From the communities. Good. That's one. When would you ask for permission? In what phase? Would you ask for permission at the stage of nomination? Dario, what do you think? You would ask. That makes sense. In perfect sense. You would also ask for permission during the inventorying phase, right? Remember that questionnaire that we looked at yesterday? That questionnaire we looked at where you were asking about threats and risk and so on. This is why that process is important, because the inventory is not just to gather information. You are also assessing the viability. So you don't have to double work in a sense. So you will go to the communities, not only at the nomination phase, but when you're working with the communities in the inventorying phase, even then you are assessing the viability of the element. During that inventorying process, you should be able to put your finger and say, you know what, this thing is at risk, you know. Right? We need to do something about this, right? That is what is happening. So there's a logical flow that when you get to the thinking about nomination, you would have already done some work with the viability. And as Dario pointed out, you would have done so in collaboration with the communities, which would help you already to meet criterion U4 and R4. It would also help you to meet criterion U3, which involves developing the safeguarding plan, as well as R3, which also requires you to write about what communities have been doing with respect to safeguarding an element that's been viable. So when you assess the viability, according to this slide, if it's viable, you're looking at the representative list. If it's low viability, then you're looking at the urgent safeguarding list. So the early work you do now will help you with your later work, right? So again, the evaluation, we just looked at this. And the USL has five or six criteria. There's a sixth one in case of emergencies. The RL has 5. The two sets largely overlap and all criteria must be met, okay? So when this is evaluated at the international level, you can't have 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5, 4 out of 5. You must have all 5 criteria met, okay? That's a breakdown there. You see how they overlap. Again, I'll be providing the PowerPoints to you so you can spend time looking at them, cross-referencing it with the operational directives, right? Not everyone involved in this process will look at the technical side of things, but it's important for everyone to be aware. And then the persons who do work with it will be doing this sort of work, no? You'll be sitting with the criteria, you'll be sitting with the text of the convention and the operational directives, and seeing how they mesh together. No? Again, we just saw U3, U2, 3, and 6 when we looked at the document. R2 and R3, we saw that too. And the point here with R2 is that that is subject to some amendment within the next year or so. So by the time Grenada gets to preparing a nomination to the international level, you want to be looking out that R2 will be slightly amended. So you have what is called preparatory assistance. You can get funding to assist you with preparing a nomination to the USL. And on the link provided, I showed you earlier, you can go there and you can find ICH form 105, I'm sorry, 05 for argument's sake. And that will be the form that you will use to apply for the preparatory assistance. All right. Then when you are applying to the fund itself, you will have to use for USL, ICH 04, you see there in the second bullet, ICH form 04, and then there's an accompanying form, ICH 01 bis. For that's the ICH 01 bis is if you are applying for funding at the same time as you're applying to have the element inscribed. But that is recommended. No? If you're going to submit something to the international level, to the USL, might as well go ahead and apply for international funding for it. No? So both files can be evaluated at the same time. There was a scenario in the past year where listen to this one, the element itself was not inscribed, but the state still received funding. Right? The state applied to have its element inscribed and applied for funding at the same time. It didn't get the inscription, but the evaluation body looked at it. The committee reviewed the recommendation and realized that indeed the element was endangered, but the criteria, the information provided was not met, which are two different things. So the body went ahead and still allocated the funding. Intergovernmental committee still allocated the funding. So what will happen is that the state will come back with their resubmission of their element to have it. So they did recognize that there was an urgent issue there. Adriana?
I'm gonna ask a question.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So what I'm understanding is that once we move forward with this project and we reported, there's a huge opportunity here because we could inscribe or submit it as a representative list, or apply if we identify or assess this is a certain ICH element that is urgent because it's a risk of being lost, and so we can apply to that. So that's what I'm understanding. That is, I want to just highlight that to everyone here, and have that and have this commitment to do it possible. Because once we will succeed, that this information, this valuable information of this current project ongoing will serve and can be utilized for this upcoming or subsequent funds. So that's what I want to understand, and I think that I understood well. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So there's an opportunity down the road, no? To pursue this. So same with the representative list, no assistance is provided or prioritized. I think there's a feedback somewhere.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So there is no priority funding allocated there, but it can be applied for activities proposed or elements inscribed on this list. So let's say you get an element inscribed at on the representative list. You can, there's nothing to stop you later on from applying for funding to support you as the state and the communities with respect to continuing to safeguard an element that's on the list. No? So the proposals to the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices, you might encounter, as I've seen documented in that list already, you might encounter scenarios where Grenada is already involved in good safeguarding practices with respect to particular elements. This is one of the lists that's not fully used in the convention, but it is one of the lists that is an opportunity to use. No, these are good safeguarding practices from around the world that states have identified in collaboration with communities that serve as models that other states can reference when attempting to safeguard well, when safeguarding particular elements. Reminds me of in both traditions seem to be taking off at the international level, by the way. If you look at the Scandinavian countries, you will see even about 2 or 3 years ago, you had elements that were registered on the Good Safeguarding Practice Register, no? And but both, so there are examples already. I'm just thinking, both is in my mind because I've heard it referenced there in the workshop quite a few times already, no? Right, but it might not be a thing for the good safeguarding. That both might actually be an RL type of thing or a USL type of thing, no? Depending on how you assess it in these days to come, right? So the committee selects for the register those programs, projects, and activities that reflect the principles and objectives of the convention. The committee, through the secretariat, promotes and disseminates information about practices on the register, on the ICH website, and in paper publication. So it's shared so that people and countries from around the world can see what other persons are doing with respect to safeguarding, good safeguarding practices. You see the register, the criterion there are slightly different. When it's assessed, does it involve safeguarding when they're looking at it? Does it promote coordination of safeguarding efforts between states? So like if you're going to do boating, would it be, is there some linkage with nearby St. Vincent and the Grenadines or some other Caribbean state, right? Does it contribute to the viability of the ICH concern of communities and their consent, given their consent to implement the good safeguarding practices? Would it be able to serve as a model for other countries, especially in developing countries? This particular point of it, this the criterion 6, and 9 actually, is also under review. I think that will probably be removed because it puts a sort of unnecessary pressure that something can be used in developing, it's just an unnecessary component from what I understand. That will too be amended in the future. But by the time you get to considering what you want to do, it'll be just some small things you'll have to be looking at that are different, no? So you have 3 examples here. A school museum of Usul pedagogical project in Spain, right? So what they do, the museum becomes like a sort of school, no? Where in a non-formal education setting, they have a system set out for teaching ICH, right? Within the museum context. So children go there for classes, they go there on weekends and so on. So that's just one model. In Indonesia, you have the batik, the print and the cloth and so on. They do education and training in batik, along with the Batik Museum. Right there, I won't try to pronounce the Pakalongan museum there, right? You have Bolivia, Chile, and Peru. You have safeguarding of ICH in the Aymara communities, right? Where the communities themselves are actively involved in teaching and transmitting the ICH, and it's viable, keeps it viable. We looked at the example of the Philippines, the School of Living Traditions in the Philippines. We referenced that in an earlier slide, where the communities themselves work with the local provincial government authorities, and they create these physical spaces where communities gather across the Philippines, where the elders pass on knowledge to younger persons, where particular practitioners of particular ICH teach the particular elements to young apprentices, right? So there are various ways, no, through which good safeguarding practices are being done and can be developed in the future. Right?
When
So
I just see this as being like a salaried position, that we pay people who are the custodians and the guardians of this thing to hold on to this, because we just have to have funding for that or get sponsorship, some kind of thing. Because you see, a lot of these heritage things, they're not commercially viable, you know. You have to subsidize it in some way to keep it alive. And
right.
I'll give you an example. Even with the sailing festival, of which I was like vice chair for 15 years.
You were a sailor?
Yeah. And the same traditional, and it's this boat regatta with these traditional boats and so. We actually had to pay the fishermen to go racing, because if we didn't, the guy's losing a day's wages. The man has to feed his family.
Really?
So to have this spectacle for the international magazines to pick up and create the tourism impact and all of that, and full attendance, we had to compensate these people, right? So the point I'm making is that it's a practical thing. It's not that they're not enjoying it or they don't want to do it, but they have a higher priority that they have to go and deal with. So I think that these custodians of heritage, I mean, it's a fun thing, it's entertainment and all of that, but people are still just above survival level.
I understand.
They can't mess around with this. This is not a hobby.
Yes,
so
I understand.
The funding is that. With the built heritage, we know maintenance is the high cost, but with intangible, it is identifying a custodian in the village or community, and if necessary, paying them.
Yeah, providing some subsidy. And when we talked about policies earlier, I remember one of the policy frameworks that could be applied is to provide subsidies or financial incentives, not create some sort of fund or private support, that sort of thing, no? Right? Dario, you had a comment?
Yes, Nigel, just to follow very much what Daryl just pointed out. For years, I'm talking about decades and 25 projects, we have paid the guide who saves the turtles with us. People walking the beach, they work all night, but they go home with the salary. And in fact, when somebody even from the community says, oh, you guys are doing this and that, or complains, often it's for envy. And the guy says, look, you know, you are knocking persons, and I have a salary now for years, I'm working. So we are actually paying those who walk the beaches. We buy the turtles when we can save them. And you see, we work in how do you say, in nature conservancy. Therefore, it's different than ICH. You have more we have more difficulties with ICH because we have to define it even among ourselves. Whereas with an endangered species, and you know from Belize, it's identifiable right away. I just go and say, you know, we're counting them. There are no nesting this year. There's no turtle nesting. Therefore, immediately we can maybe not so easily, but more easily do exactly what you're saying. There's jobs, but also there are projects that can come in immediately as soon as you confirm your perception of ICH. Immediately, you also put a cost to it and say, and we do the safeguarding. In conservation, we do this all the time. So in a way, I may say, I follow, of course, this convention, precisely constantly relating it to the conservation that we do. Exactly. Only now you're doing it with the human aspects and the cultural and personal aspects. In all of this, if I don't mind, just one thing. Before we started, what came to mind, and I will not say where I was sitting on the loo, if you don't mind, but what came to me was this. We may and need to unify and share information. We may, but we cannot unify knowledge. It is an individual process, knowledge. And you can see it in what we do. The learning is a flame. Knowing for me is information in action. When the human acts according to the information. When there is no information, I'm potentially like an ATV, like a Jeep that wants to go, but I can't go because nobody drives me. I do not have a program. So in this respect, we should be, I feel, from my experience, be careful that the work is on the ground. We can prepare the museum, but we cannot get the children to learn unless we provide a real live object. The vessel of the knowledge is important. When they feel it, they're on the beach, they see the turtle, we do theater, we do puppets, you cook together. And then the children say, this was the greatest day of school.
Good.
You know, okay, sorry. So
yeah, no.
Rather important. So we're completely along with a huge amount of society that already fights for conservation of animals, of trees, and this and that and that and that. Now it's coming together. That's beautiful, because finally we tend to put the mirror not on the outside but on the inside, which is culture, on ourselves. That's fantastic. There will be no colonization possible then.
Nigel,
if we become aware. If we are not, somebody will come and colonize us.
In the chat about well, I guess it mitigates it a little bit, but in Regatta, for example, individuals from the Grenadines and St. Vincent participate, but on a competitive basis, and there's a prize at the end. So I guess there's one person going to be getting the salary right there. But that may dampen the point that Darryl was making, but it's not a substitute.
Let me give you, and I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say. It's also an opportunity for local businesses to attach themselves to some of the local ICH, right? Maybe, and it's you have to sell it to them too, or they might see the opportunity, or if they don't see it, you make sure that they don't miss it, no? Like in Belize, it's only until the 1950s thereabout that we started to get proper roads. So most of the travel was done via the rivers, via paddling and so on. So we have this tradition, just like in the island, you know, the indigenous people traveling by sailing or by paddling. So one of the things that has happened in the last 25 years, the paddling tradition has been put into a more competitive space, where you have one of the major, or at least a couple of the major local companies here, they organize an annual canoe race that's done over 4 days, right? And it's now become a major thing, just like the regatta, but it becomes like a major thing where they provide prizes for all sorts of categories. You have a family category, you have male categories, mixed categories, school categories. So sometimes, like when it started off, you had like maybe 20 plus teams. I've paddled it twice myself. There are like 20 something teams. And when it's grown to having 98 teams in some years, so, and it fluctuates, no? But what it does, there's an economic component to it, but there's also the social component, because you have a team of 3 persons. Each person has a family behind them, right? And if you take 90 teams, that's 270 persons. Each person having a family, you can imagine what sort of festivity that turns into, you know? And families travel along the river, waiting for their team to pass over 4 days. It becomes a big social event. It generates economic activity along the route of the river and in the communities and so on, right? Because they stop each day and at a village. And so economic activity comes to that village, right? But the thing is, there's big promotion. The companies that sponsor it, their products are there too, being sold and promoted and so on, right? But at the end of it all, at least of there what, 3 prizes for 7 categories. So at least 21 of the teams will walk away with some type of prize, no? So it's the same thing, just giving thinking that you can combine the private sector with this sort of thing, right?
Yes,
so that it's not only the state having to dole out some of these funds, you know.
listen, we have to be, we would like to be idealists and would like to keep commercialization out of a lot of things that we think it may be an unethical thing in some way, or maybe degrading in some way. But the point is that these things need funding. And one of the reasons that these workboat regattas, the prizes are cash, because we used to get some fabulous gifts, donated expensive wristwatches and things like that. And the fishermen said, look, man, just give me some cash, please. This racing and so costs money. I need cash. So let us face the realities that are facing our people. They would like to help, but we can't just give them old talk all the time and say, come on, man, you got to do this. We have to find some way to give them some cash. So we have to commercialize a lot of these things and be very creative for sustainability.
Good. Ezra, you were going to say, and then Margaret?
No.
Okay.
Margaret, go ahead.
I was just thinking with the monetizing the ICH, is that an opportunity to have that written into the policy or to whatever things that we develop going forward? Because one of the things that I've noticed is there's a reluctance to register a business that is not really a business. It's what I do. But then to be included in certain rosters, certain lists that would come out of different organizations, parastatal, government, or otherwise, there's a financial commitment attached to it, whether it's a certification, a licensing, whatever it is. However, we miss those people because they don't show up on rosters because they're not part of the economic driver for the ICH. So I guess I'm suggesting / asking, is this an opportunity for us to put that into a policy so that whether you're a registered business or not, if you are a participant or an actor in the ICH, that there's still a pathway to success in monetizing it.
Yes.
That's the thought.
Very good question. And actually, the convention encourages, as part of states' frameworks and policies, that you provide incentives for private entities who might be able to fund a particular ICH. Now, in terms of low policy at the national level, one of the things I would say, to put it concisely, is that you would song something like this. You would want to support ICH that provides for sustainable livelihoods. I guess that would be one way to put it, no? Right? Anything that, if the lady makes the best oil down in Tongman, create an enabling environment for her, no? To make that oil down, which is a part of national identity, as well as make a living from it, no? And that could apply to any ICH, right? It's just being able to, and this will come with your inventorying, your assessment, looking at it more closely and working with the communities, no? But good question, Margaret, right? I'm sure others will have, being on the ground, you will have other opinions on it, no? So let's wrap up this segment then. Good interventions, thank you. The number of files treated every year, you have what you call priorities, and they're as follows. Files from states that have no elements inscribed. So if Grenada were to submit a nomination, you would be up there on the list for evaluation. You have countries that have backlogs, no? Some countries like China and so on, they have like multiple nominations waiting in the line to be evaluated. But they would have to continue to wait because they have elements inscribed already. But if Grenada comes in, and Grenada would be moved up that list, right, to have their element evaluated for inscription. Priorities are also for those to USL, Urgent Safeguarding List. Multinational files are also given priority. So for example, if one of these days St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, St. Vincent and Grenadines would want to put together a file dealing with parang or string music, or that would be something to do, and that would be given a priority. Files from
Nigel, I think you should put cross-border files, because you multinational suggests some large American corporation or something like that.
Yeah, I see what
when
you
you
mean.
say cross-border cooperation, it's more like nations collaborating.
Got you.
Okay.
Got you. Very good point.
Okay.
Cross-border files. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Files from states with the fewest elements inscribed. So that's going down the list. So if we've gone through that top, then you start picking from files with the fewest elements inscribed. They do an average of 50 per year. Last year, there was pressure and they went up to 60 files evaluated. And then this year, you're back down to about 55, but there's a lot of pressure. States are putting the evaluation body and the secretariat under pressure to evaluate as many files as possible. But trust me, evaluating 50 files per year is a lot of work. Each of these documents, just to review one file takes probably a day. That's just to review one file, right? If it's done properly, right?
But you should also add that our application took about just over 2 years. And when we looked at the awards last October, because that's when these things came through, we noticed that other countries, Botswana and so on, that were being awarded grants, they'd also applied around the same time that we had. So it's a 2-year process minimum. And that I remember that for some things, there's no preparation assistance. So it basically is 2 years of funding an application, knowing that there's a risk that you may not be awarded. So
right.
So it's a kind of it's serious business. I mean, this is not something. I think people need to understand the challenge of doing this. We want to do it, but we mustn't look away from the elephant in the room.
Right. It does take tremendous investment of time by the persons preparing these applications. So let me address that in this segment. So since you raised it, well, it was coming in, but let me address that part of it here. So you have the body looking at representative list nominations, USL nominations, register of good safeguarding practices, and then you have international requests of more than $100,000. Those are assessed by the evaluation body. So that process in itself takes 2 years. Let me repeat that. Anything that's going to the evaluation body will take about 2 years. From the time you submit to the time your files they get back to you to say, well, please submit this, complete this, and so on. Then by the time the evaluation body reviews it, it will be the following year. And then you get a decision in December of the following year. So we are in March now, just to give you a good sense. We are in March now. So states that are submitting nominations to the representative list, urgent safeguarding list, the register of good safeguarding practices, or are applying for assistance of over $100,000 have to do so by the end of this month, right? They have to do so by the end of this month. In the next few months, the Secretariat will take their files, look at it, see if it's complete. If there's anything missing, they go back to the state and ask the state, please complete your file, right? And then the process then moves on to another phase, where it's then sent to the evaluation body to be evaluated. That decision, that final evaluation isn't completed until around September of not this year. That will be completed in September of 2023, right? And then a decision will be handed down in December of next year. So if you apply now for a request over $100,000, your response won't come until December next year, 2023. All right? However,
no,
yes.
But Nigel, the reason I raised that is so that we could emphasize to all the bodies that have said, oh, yes, we need to collaborate, work together, blah, blah, blah. You cannot survive in this environment unless you actually collaborate and become like under one umbrella body, because you can't survive these kind of costs. These costs that you're looking at there, the preparation and everything, is not designed for third world, it's designed for second world. So if you're really poor and small, you really can't qualify. So the only way we could beat that is by combining resources, and people should make up their mind, allocate 10% of whatever budget you think you have for preparation of submissions. And if we pool that and all of the Grenada cultural organizations work together, then we can do it.
Yeah, I think you've painted the picture that needs to be done, and you're right. We working with limited resources, you want to pool human and the financial resources. So here's a diagram that looks at that, Daryl, a 2-year process. Again, I'll share this, all of you will have this.
And remember, Nigel, you talk about the state is submitting this thing. What is really happening is that it is the little NGOs that are submitting it. What we are trying to do is hold heritage together until the state juggernaut is ready to give heritage more priority and it actually becomes a state submission. What is happening is that the little NGOs are submitting it with endorsement from the state that, okay, you guys go ahead, you know, because we, the state, are not doing it because we have other priorities. So thank God you little guys are doing it, you know, but we have to get to the point where it's actually a state initiative and we are supporting them.
Well, if I understand what you're saying, Daryl, but if I can phrase it in another way, what you want actually is genuine collaboration between state and the community groups,
right,
and so on. Because it's not it's actually a powerful thing when your NGOs can do that. But if there's a synchronized approach between the state and then that's where there's beauty to the whole thing, no? It means that there's a national priority for it. Exactly. So what are the effects of inscribing elements on the list of the convention? Right. So in terms of the objectives, the representative list and urgent safeguarding list. The representative list aims to ensure visibility of ICH, of heritage in general, awareness of its significance, and encouraging dialogue which respects cultural diversity. The urgent safeguarding list aims at offering international recognition of specific threats facing an element of ICH heritage, and a well-elaborated safeguarding plan, which we talked about, that adequately responds to them, right? So in light of that, then, you have to ask yourself, when you're going to prepare these nominations, what do you think are the effects of inscription on the element? Which do you think are positive and which are negative? Because sometimes when you might bring attention to a thing, but you might be doing it more harm than good, right? The issue of over-commercialization and these sorts of things, no? And undue pressure being brought onto communities that aren't prepared to, especially where foreign interference or tourism or even domestic tourism and so on can bring undue pressure on particular elements. Imagine, you know, I'll just give you an idea. Imagine there's this 70-year-old man, last person making and playing a harp, for argument's sake, right? And the inventory, the skill of playing the harp and indigenous music, the harp not being an indigenous instrument anyway, so you document all of that and so forth. And then he's the only one who knows how to play the animal songs of the creation story of the Maya. And you go and they create this nice documentary and you highlight the life and contributions of this man. And then all of a sudden, even at the national level, after you put it in your inventory and you have this big thing and you invite the man out to the press conference and all that, all of a sudden, every minute, every weekend, schools are packed up there in his village, and at his house, the man is 70 years old, and people are there wanting to see him and hear him play, right? That might actually be detrimental in the longer run to his own vitality as a human being, his ability to continue to build a harp or to play it and so on might actually be him. So you have to think about all these little things and how you give it attention, much less at the international level. Because you do have people out there, when they hear some of these things, they're fascinated by it, and then tourists start pouring in and they want to take pictures and sit and interview the person and so on. Sometimes it's very little benefit to the person. And I find with people who are owners of ice, they're very willing to share, but it comes at a great cost to them too. So all of these is a fine balance, you know. You're trying to maintain. So you want to be conscious of the effects of inscription all the time, you know. Positive or negative. Yes, sir.
We have a chat here. I guess it brings alive Daryl's point about cross-border collaboration, but it was said that several countries in Central America, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, they cooperated to have language, dance, and music of the Garifuna inscribed in 2008. So we have a model for that type of cross-border collaboration. It saves money for individual state, but I think it's something that we should even, well, not now because we don't have a lot of stuff, but I think it's something we can look at, that model, you know, the Grenadines or St. Vincent and stuff like that moving forward.
Excellent.
But then the other issue is I'm not sure at what level the collaboration took place, whether or not it was at the organizational level or the national level. This looks like the organizational level.
It took place at the international level. At the governmental level.
At the governmental, okay.
Right, that's
pretty good.
Yeah, that actually started.
Garifuna is like a minority, and if the governments getting together, you know, governments like Honduras doing that, that's pretty cool.
Right. It started at the governmental level with the Prime Minister and Minister of Cultures meeting and tabling that and so on. But it became at the request of Garifuna community leaders, right?
Right.
Came at the request of Margaret.
No, I think her hand is up.
Oh yeah, Margaret's hand is up.
Okay,
I wanted to. There's one more thing I want to do before we go to break and come to you, Daryl.
Okay.
We talked about the over $100,000 request. There's a second component which we look at in the second segment. It's because we're dealing with nominations, but we look at that shortly. There's a section where you can apply for funding under $100,000. That does not take 2 years.
It does.
Right? What happened in Grenada's case, COVID slowed things down tremendously. There was a lot of uncertainty globally. Even UNESCO was dealing with things internally and so on. But the request for under $100,000, those can be processed within 3 to 6 months, right? So it's almost better for small states like ours to go for the under $100,000 applications, because that will give us the leeway to work. And by the time we finish that project, we just continue on to we apply again and report and then apply and go again, you know? So.
Okay, I just want to add on to Ezra's point and the point that Margaret raised. We actually did in 2012 a cross-border collaboration with the National Trust of St. Vincent. And when we tried to do a second phase of that project in 2016, there was the person had left. Now you see these little NGOs that just have 2 and 3 people. One person leaves, that's a disaster. So so the continuity and the continuation of what you're doing. This is why, as I said, we're just holding things together until the government juggernaut can get going. And in the meantime, we have to do like the EU that combine to become something big so they could compete with the US and Russia and so on. Right. All the NGOs have to combine to become big enough to be like a sort of community government almost, because we cannot function alone with 2 and 3 people operating in an organization.
Good insight there.
Good.
All right, we have one more section to complete, and I think we'll be able to do it. We might have to go about 10 minutes over time, but if you can take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs and then come back. All right, let's do that then, and then we'll look at international cooperation and assistance, just as what you said just now. is a good starting point, no? How to pool human resources and so on. So let's do that then, 5 minutes, and we'll be right back. Thanks.
All right.